Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this very short and important inaugural session of this exciting Gyan course on discrete choice experiments from the perspectives of, I think, sustainable development, climate change solutions. I have the honor of welcoming all of you. My colleagues, Professor Amitabh Mattu is the Dean of the School of International Studies, Professor Satyabrata Patnaik, who is the JNU coordinator for Gyan program, which is a flagship program of the Government of India. And I have the pleasure of welcoming the resource person of this Gyan course, who has come all the way from Sweden, Dr. Adan Martinez-Cruz, a very good friend of ours, whom we met last year also at JNU, in this very hall, actually. And my colleague from CITD, Professor Sangeeta Bansal, who is coordinating, who is the Indian counterpart of this Gyan course. I welcome all of you, all the participants, my colleagues sitting here in the dais, as well as the ones who are sitting in front of me, the participants who have registered for this course, who are sitting here on site, as well as the ones who are joining us online from different parts of the world. With these words, I would like to say that I'm very excited about this course, because I think this choices in social science and in economics, we come across choices which are discrete in nature, and which are actually, when we come to the statistics or quantitative analysis of choices, discrete choices which are qualitative variables, we generally face a lot of challenges, like the good world of continuous variables suddenly falls flat, and we come across difficulties of analyzing these discrete variables. And I'm sure during this course we will be able to understand issues of addressing these challenges, statistical challenges, as well as the issues of addressing or extracting qualitative preference choice variables through experiments, as Dr. Adan Martinez-Cruz will teach us during this next 5 years of course on this particular topic. So without much delay, I would request Professor Sangeeta Bansal, my colleague from CITD, to give an overview of this course. Professor Bansal, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mandira, and a very good afternoon to all. I'm delighted to extend a warm welcome to Professor Mattu, Dean SIS, Professor Patnaik, Coordinator, Gyan JNU, Professor Sarma, Chair CITD, our resource person, Professor Adan Martinez-Cruz, esteemed colleagues from JNU, and participants. There was an overwhelming response to this course. Close to 90 participants from 30 universities all over India and some from abroad have registered for the course, including IITs, Tirupati, IIT Kharagpur, IIT Roorkee, IIT Indore, IIMs, Kalyani University, Kolkata, CDS Trivandrum, Punjab Agricultural University, Aligarh Muslim University, and from Delhi, many institutes, IFT, ICAR, TERI, IG, and others. A special welcome to our participants from Tribhuvan University, Nepal, who some of them are here and some of them have joined online. It's truly heartening to see many of our former students who are now faculty members at various universities to be here and join us today. You're always welcome to your alma mater, and it's such a delight to see you back. And of course, our JNU students and faculty are always enthusiastic to learn new concepts and new methods. And my colleagues and students are here. Professor Samina and Professor Mandira's participation in this course is exemplary and will immensely enrich the course as we go on. Both of them, they're so dedicated and determined that apart from whatever vast knowledge they have, they still want to learn more. Welcome to all. I'll briefly introduce the cause. For goods and services which are available in the market, prices reflect their value. We can always use price to say what is the valuation. However, many goods and services, they are not traded in the market. For instance, national parks, cleaning up of Ganga, Himalayas, protecting Himalayas, reducing air pollution. What kind of a value can we assign to them? Policymakers still need to assign and allocate budget to these services. And this necessitates benefits as to, we have limited resources. All developing countries have limited resources. How do we allocate them? What is more important? How do citizens value them? So this is what we'll be able to estimate here. Choice experiments are a key method for non-market valuation. They can be used to simulate market and understand people's preferences and priorities. They have diverse applications across many fields such as environmental amenities, ecosystem services, policy making, political science, health, food quality, labor markets, so on and on. These methods are particularly valuable for evaluating new and emerging products and technologies which are still at the development stage. They're not in the market yet, but huge amount of scientific effort and large amount of investment needs to develop these new products and technologies. What attributes should they have? Do consumers really care about them? An assessment of valuation for these things will help in developing these products and will make these investments meaningful. And especially these are being used for breeding new crop varieties, new seeds. What is the attribute that farmers would value? How do you know? You need to know it at the development stage because billions and billions dollars of money goes in their development. So this is one method which helps us to assess them. During COVID times, many choice experiments were conducted to evaluate preference for vaccine attributes. So that's like one of the recent things which we all can relate. And in political science, effect of candidate characteristics on voter choice, that can be known by choice experiment. So the applications, these are tools and methods, and applications goes to various social science and science fields. It's not limited to economics, and more and more there's potential to develop them in other fields. I'll now introduce our speaker, Professor Adan Martinez-Cruz. He is at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences and is affiliated with ETS Zurich. He obtained his PhD from University of Maryland, USA. He is member of the board of Latin American Association of Environment and Resource Economists, on the International Advisory Board of Solar Energy and Graduate School, among other distinctions. He has expertise in applications and innovations in non-market valuation techniques and has made significant contributions to the literature. He engages with policymakers to address their needs and also ensure that research insights contribute to informed decision making. Thank you very much, Adan, for accepting our invitation and visiting us to deliver this set of lectures. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our Vice Chancellor, Professor Pandit, and the Gyan program team, Ministry of Education, for facilitating international scholars to visit JNU, promoting knowledge exchange, fostering collaborations, and developing high-quality course material in specialized areas. I must thank JNU coordinator, Professor Patnaik, and his wonder team, Saurabh, one-man team, and they have a magic wand. It was never so, smooth navigating through university administration. Everything just falls in place, everything gets done within a day or two, and this was amazing, marvelous organization and support. I'm grateful to our dean and the chairperson for hosting the visiting faculty at SIS and extending support throughout the process. And of course, our student volunteers who always get so enthusiastic whenever CITD is trying to organize something, and they contributed to all arrangements. I look forward to 5 days of intense learning, stimulating discussions, new ideas, and new applications of choice experiments. Thank you, Mandira.
Thank you, Sangeeta. I would like to invite Professor Amitabh Mattu, the Dean of the School of International Studies, to say a few words of welcome. Thank you.
Professor Mandira Sharma, thank you very much, and all the distinguished participants, the faculty members, including my colleagues, Professor Barun Sani, Professor Samina Hamid, Prishti, Rashmi, who else is there? And of course, people sitting on the dais who I'll acknowledge separately. I must say that this is the third SIS Gyan course. We had one on West Asia, the second one on Eurasia, and this one is an outstanding course under the Global Initiative for Academic Network. This initiative is one of the most exciting initiatives of the Ministry of Higher Education. And I do want to first of all thank Professor Patnaik, who, as Professor Bansal pointed out, seems to have a magic wand, because he's really delivered with efficiency and alacrity these Gyan programs. Thank you, sir, for your support. The idea is really to bring some of the brightest international academics from all over the world to enrich the academic experience of our students primarily, but also students and faculty members and students from our neighborhood. I'm delighted that there are 90 participants and a large number who are going to join online from Tribhuvan University in Kathmandu. And I think the course itself, from reference to policy, discrete choice experiments for climate change, is an important and an exciting one. I must also congratulate Professor Sangeeta Bansal for all her tireless efforts, particularly first as chairperson and now for organizing this course. She has also received a fellowship to go to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and I hope even there she will help to foster international collaboration. And her initiative here is really unparalleled in terms of the learning opportunities that it offers to all of us. I would also like to thank Professor Mandira Sharma, who is the current chair for the Center for International Trade and Development. And she has quietly and silently brought about a silent revolution within the center. And I look forward to working with her as we blend CITD into SIS more seamlessly and have a vision for the whole school in the 70th year of our anniversary. As you heard, in terms of this course itself, we are here presented with a unique opportunity to explore the intersection of individual preferences and policy making in the context of climate change. Climate change is, I don't need to tell you this, one of the most pressing challenges of our time, affecting ecosystems, economies, our lifestyle, our communities. The urgency to address this crisis has never been greater, despite or in spite of Trump. And understanding the factors that influence public preferences is critical for the development of effective and sustainable policies. Now, discrete choice experiments, as Professor Bansal and Professor Mandira Sharma pointed out, offer an extremely important and powerful methodological framework to analyze how individuals make decisions regarding complex issues such as climate change. By systematically evaluating preferences, we can gain insights into the trade-offs people are willing to make and the values they prioritize. This knowledge that you gather from these discrete choice experiments are essential for policymakers seeking to design the most meaningful interventions that resonate with both the public and can drive meaningful action towards climate resilience and sustainability. There is no better person, I understand, who can deliver this intensive course on discrete choice experiments in climate change than Dr. Adan Martinez-Cruz, who brings a wealth of expertise and a global perspective that will undoubtedly enrich our discussions. His work at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences exemplifies the innovative approaches needed to tackle the multifaceted challenges posed by climate change. We are privileged, sir, for you to have you here and for you having taken the time from your schedule to spend the next week or so with us. Finally, for the participants, as we engage with this course, I encourage each one of you to approach the subject with an open mind, willingness to challenge conventional thinking, both methodologically as well as in substantive issues. As I said, climate change is not merely an environmental issue, it's a socio-economic, ethical dilemma that requires collaborative solutions. By participating in this course, I'm sure you will not only enhance your understanding of preferences and policies, but also equip yourself methodologically with the tools to be able to intervene in your communities and beyond. In conclusion, I wish you all a stimulating and enriching experience as we embark on this academic journey together. Let's seize this opportunity to learn from one another, to learn from Dr. Martinez-Cruz, and foster a spirit of global cooperation that transcends borders. Together, I believe we can contribute to the critical discourse surrounding climate change and work towards a sustainable future through this Gyan intensive program. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mattu, for this inspiring words from you. I now invite Professor Satyabrata Patnaik, who is the coordinator of the Gyan program at JNU, to give us a few words of advice. Thank you.
So namaskar and good afternoon. So we are very happy and grateful that Professor Martinez-Cruz has accepted our invitation to initiate this Gyan program. Gyan, the full form is Global Initiative for Academic Network. So it's not a series of talks or some kind of workshop. So the primary objective is network building. And so he's here, he's going to be here a week. And so we would encourage everyone to interact with the expert and also, look for opportunity beyond this set of courses. Someone will get a PhD, postdoc, a new project. So it should be more department to department collaboration. Gyan has next step. This is just the beginning. So you can have a 3-year program also. So, so remember, this is not just a set of lectures or some kind of conference proceeding. It is networking that is at the key thing here. And particularly, Vice Chancellor is very happy that 3 programs under SIS, they have been approved under the Gyan Phase 4. She is an illustrious alumni of SIS. And if I'm correct, SIS was the first school in JNU. And I'm a physicist by training. We are scientists. And we are somewhat considered impurity in the... JNU is a humanities-centric university. But remember, the element silicon has no monetary value. Only when you dope impurity like boron or phosphorus, then it becomes a semiconductor that is useful in a chip. So impurities are required. So that is how we justify our existence. But SIS is the core of JNU, and the brightest of the brightest students come here, get trained. And so it is, I think it's very happy that SIS is leading the most of the courses on the Gyan program this year. We live in strange times where artificiality and intelligence is valued more than intelligence. Where what was claimed to be openness in AI seems to be making more money than deep seekers. These are very strange times. And as a physicist, we have done a little bit of probability theory and all that choices. I can tell you, I spend most of my time in in looking for choices. Republic Day sale was here. I wanted to buy a tablet. I almost spent 15 days. It's not just the money. I mean, which cheap and which is at 8 GB, 128 GB, and finally where I get the max. So choices are driving us more. I mean, next, I'm not sure how many students will be learning electromagnetic theory when I give lectures within next 10 years, because everything is going to be automated now. AI is going to dominate, and that's a paradox of the highest order. My job is going because I'm a producer of knowledge, but I'm expected to be as a consumer. So AI essentially is generating something where my role as a producer is going out, whereas my role as a consumer is essential, right? So with those paradoxes and choices, I think time is coming. People would not learn EMT theory from my lectures, but I am expected to improve my understanding of electromagnetic theory by listening to AI generated as a consumer. So choices are going to be very important. Whether you want to travel, whether you want to learn something, whether you want to buy something, everywhere choice is the maximal prerogative now. And I also have learned a little bit of discrete choices and in economics. As physicists who believe in randomness, there's nothing called randomness. I mean, there's nothing called chaos. There is a pattern everywhere. And these such studies will tell you that not everything is irrational. I mean, there is some rationale behind what the quantum mechanics is based on that. I mean, there is some rationality, even probabilistic theory. The fact of the matter is chips work, and it is extremely probabilistic. And as a physicist, I can tell you, I mean, not that Newton's laws and all these classical laws are wrong, but there was initially an idea that classical physics or classical ideas are essentially a subset of, those are the superset where quantum mechanical probabilistic theories somehow work. Now the most agreed acceptance is that it is quantum mechanics which is the superset, and classical ideas where probability was not, everything that was deterministic is essentially a subset. So these are the new trends, and I hope that there will be a lot of discussions and we would all learn more from Professor Martinez-Cruz lectures. But all the best. Remember, this is the GYAN program. Full form is Global Initiative Academic Network. It's not a lecture series. Interact with the guru, and so thereby let's enrich ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Malik. You have really bridged the gap between physics and social sciences, and we're grateful for that. And before I invite the resource person to give her introductory remarks, I would like to request Professor Mattu, the Dean of SIS, to offer a small token of felicitation to our resource person.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. May I now invite Professor Adan L. Martinez-Cruz to just give us an introduction to the course before the course begins in the next session. Maybe just a few words. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Sarma, Professor Mattu, Professor Patnaik, Professor Bansal. Thank you so much. I am very honored to be invited as a guest, and I am very excited. Professor Bansal and I met in 2016, and since the very beginning we had a very collegial relationship as researchers. And part of what I try to convey these days is that if you have a research idea and you are able to communicate it to your colleagues, you probably are going to be able to start a good collaboration. And discrete choice experiments is probably going to be one of those tools that can engage you with colleagues that are in your field, but potentially also beyond your field. Natural scientists, social scientists, people developing technologies. This is a tool that is going to help you to establish those collaborations as much as I established it with Professor Bansal, because that is our first collaboration was a discrete choice experiment for the Indian context, and we will be talking about it later on. The part where I want to highlight is I am very grateful because for me this is an opportunity to share my lessons in the journey from a PhD student to a researcher. As a PhD student, I did not know how to design a research agenda that I could link to public policy. And I feel that some of you may relate to what I am saying. Sometimes as PhD students, we just don't know where or how to ask questions. And it was not really until very late in my PhD and almost as a postdoc that I was aware of how powerful discrete choice experiments are to ask a question that can ultimately have a direct implication in public policy. So I am very grateful because this is an opportunity to share a little bit of that experience with you. And you will realize as the course goes by that I am very, very chatty, very storytelling, very not super structured, but that's because I get super excited and then I remember a lot of the anecdotes or a lot of the stories that go behind the studies. And then I kind of the BA and I start telling the stories. So don't shy away and remind me, hey, this was the main topic, and then I will go back to the main topic. Okay. One thing I want to highlight is what Professor Patnaik mentioned. This is a network event as well, and please, I don't remember right now which one is my office, but I will be here in the mornings in an office.
SIS1.
SIS1. And I will be arriving around 9:30 to 10. So every one of you and anyone who may want to be visiting and asking questions, you are very welcome. The door will be open because I also come with that spirit. I do want to establish a network and well, actually I want to enhance it. I want to make it stronger because Sangeeta and I are already a very, very strong team. But I definitely come with the goal of including more people in the team. So don't forget, truly don't forget and just go and ask questions. And actually I tend to be very good on one-on-one. So maybe sometimes in general I might miss some points, but if you have specific questions and you feel shy and you don't want to raise them in the session, knock at my door. So during this week, I will try to convey that the discrete choice experiments are flexible mixed methods that can help you to design a research agenda with a public policy question in mind. And I also will try to convey that in many contexts, that's your to-go tool. We as economists have beautiful tools to test causality, beautiful tools to test impacts, but sometimes they are expensive and sometimes they take too long. And more importantly, sometimes they are actually not feasible. Professor Bansal already mentioned what happens when the subject of the matter is an innovation. I'm not sure about the pool of your skills, but maybe some of you are already thinking on solutions, technological solutions, or some sort of innovation that you want to implement. Those innovations are not going to take off if you do not consider the preferences of the people who might end up using them, the end user. And because those innovations likely are not in the market yet, just in your mind, I strongly recommend you to start thinking with these tools that we are going to be discussing here, as those tools that are going to help you to receive feedback from your potential end user. The potential end user could be farmers, could be forest owners. Right now, there in Sweden where I am working, a lot of the research agenda is focused on the forest sector. So these days, a lot of the stakeholders that I approach are forest-related stakeholders. But in my country, I approach a lot of farmers. And very importantly, your end user could be policymakers as well. So in some contexts, discrete choice experiments are going to be your to-go tool when other tools that we learn as econometricians are not possible or are too expensive. So that is something I will be conveying this week as well. So I just want to finish to repeat that this is really an honor, a true honor, and I'm very happy to be here. And I I really want to exploit all the synergies, and I really want to take advantage of all the human capital embedded in you as students. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I think with that, we come to an end of this inaugural session because more exciting sessions are waiting for us. The core of the Gyan course this week. So with thanks to everybody, to Professor Mattu, to Adan Martinez-Cruz, Professor Satyabrata Patnaik, Dr. Bansal, Professor Bansal, and all of you, thank you very much for being with us today in this session, and see you again. Thank you. Bye.
Maybe one picture for all of us.
हाँ ये भी लेना है बच्चे को
या यहाँ ठीक है कि आगे खड़े हैं?
यहाँ से भी लेना मनी साहब आप भी आ जाइए ना
हाँ प्लीज
क्या बात
Samina, no please come.
आइए
Please join us.
आइए
We can wait for sure. No problem.
Yeah, please
Panelists, come on, seriously, it's not necessary. Thank you, very kind of you.
See, this gentleman in the red, his aunt used to run the first photography shop. So we're gender empowerment, and now she's gone off to America, where she set up a series of photographic shops. That is my exaggeration, but she's gone off to America and left the business to the nephew. क्यों आपकी बुआ चलाती थी ना?
You know so much.
You only have to live on this campus for 30 years.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We will be back in this. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. We will see you
अच्छा ये
tomorrow.
इसका 10th का Thank you very much. I might come and drop by and hear you. But what is the news on the energy?
We are still discussing.
Think of future without. He may be alive.
You've taken over again.
Should I change my?
I will bring
You change.
Thank you. ये तो आपका women's power as well.
Please come and join us.
Yeah.
You're the,
Sure.
you're the crown.
और इसे भी लेना समीना आप क्या कोई आज इनॉग्रेशन है उसमें जा रही है ना हाँ bibliotheque इसे one second I only trust my own camera and no I tweeted it yeah and Rashmi is the only one who's
I gained quite a followership after he tweeted my tweets. So,
Thank you.
no वो उसी को bibliotheque follow ना
ನಾನು ಕೊಡಲೇ ಕೊಡ್ಕೊಂಡೆ ಅದ ಒಂದೊಂದು
Yeah, so now we'll begin the lecture series, and I just wanted to make a small announcement that for getting certificate, attendance is compulsory as per the GYAN program. There will also be some evaluation, and we'll tell you how it goes. We have also created one Google Drive where we are going to post all the materials, so all the handouts, some data sets, and even some assignments. We are going to post it on that, and we'll give access to everybody so that all the material is in one place and you can access it whenever you want. So now over to you, Anne.
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for being here from the very, very beginning. We have here for 5 more days, and the last day, Sangeeta is going to be leading the conversation, but you're going to see me here for the 5 days. And so I know that it's a very demanded course, and before I go ahead, I would like you to raise your hand, those of you here in the room who are social scientists, who are economists, political scientists, public policy, raise your hands. International relationships, okay, okay. Not all of you. Okay, so who of you are natural scientists, biologists, ecologists, engineers? No? 1, yeah? 2, more? No more? Okay, I just want to make sure that we have we are reaching out to the natural scientists. In the university where I work these days, in the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, as the name says, it is very focused on agriculture and forest in the land sciences. And I have a lot of conversations with colleagues in there and students who are not economists, who hate economics. So I have developed certain skills to, I think, communicate even better what I do. And I really appreciate those conversations because I think they have made me clearer. Here is the first assignment. I want you to start thinking as we move, what will be your discrete choice experiment? Hopefully by the end of the week, you can provide a very basic design of a discrete choice experiment. Just for you to know, that is at the beginning of December, I went to Morocco to the UM6P, and we did that also in a 4-day course. And by then, the students were able, most of them, to present some design of discrete choice experiment that they thought were interesting. And what I will think that is the main key question here for you to answer to yourself is, what will be the topic where you want to provide an informed insight? I know that several of you are PhD students. I know that several of you are already PhDs and are professors, or several of you are already researchers. What will be the topic? What will be the question that if you were able to provide certain insights, the policymaker or the innovator or your own enterprise could take off? Right? And we are going to be talking about examples. Don't you worry. But I would like you to actively be thinking on that through the entire 5 days. And hopefully you will have specific questions. You are welcome to raise your hand as we move. And you say, well, I was thinking in this topic, and I was thinking that my attribute could be this. What do you think? And then we all try to provide feedback. I tend to be very engage with the students and give the word to you because, as you may guess, talking for 3 hours straight gets tiring. So I need you to talk a little bit as well. So don't shy away from participating. During the presentations, it was said that the choices are discrete. And if you think about it, I started getting interested in this topic when I realized that even when most of our analysis and most of our theory kind of focus on continuous decisions, right? Or we model it as if we could buy fractions of a car. we really, if you think about it, most of our decisions are discrete. Either you buy a car or you don't, right? Either you buy your iPad or you don't. Either you take a trip or not. You decide to invest on energy efficiency or not. Decide to implement a new technology in your farm or not. We are really surrounded by discrete decisions. Some of them are actually you have to decide among multiple options, not only between one or other, but for instance, when it comes to choice of transportation, you could decide between going by bike, going by bus, going by metro, taking the car, calling an Uber. And those are also discrete choices from which you have to take different multiple options, right? It's not only one or the other. Those are very easy examples. But at the same time, those examples I am giving you are the decisions that we take as individuals. The farmer takes a decision as a producer of implementing or not a technology. You and I take a decision of how to commute to school individually. And discrete choice experiments are about exploring the preferences of those individuals, either as consumers or as commuters in this case, or as producers in the case of the farmers, or as I mentioned in Sweden these days, the case of the forest owners is a stakeholder group that I am very interested these days. And remember, the name of the course is From Preferences to Public Policy. So the key point here is going to be, we are going to be exploring preferences of potential users, end users. I'm going to be calling them end users in general. Either they are going to be producers or they are going to be consumers. And that is usually where you see that the applications of papers end. Well, we explore these preferences, and it turns out people prefer this over this. The key element of this course that I hope it will be engaging for you is, how do we generate policy implications? And the key is aggregation. I can be exploring your preferences, and then it turns out your preferences are different than your preferences. We are going to be discussing that. By the end, the point to take it to the public policy is, how do you aggregate those preferences? Because that is going to be the key component for policymakers, right? They are going to be like, sure, okay, well, some people like this, some people like that. What do I do with that? And then, very importantly, when you aggregate preferences, you will realize, oh, there are some people who are going to be losing if we implement a recommended policy, because according to my discrete choice experiment, some people dislike what I am suggesting. That is one powerful element of the discrete choice experiments. You can document the proportion of your respondents who not only don't like it, but dislike it. You come, and I always say this to the students in the natural sciences, because as I said, they are the ones who, one, don't like too much what I do to begin with, and two, they think that they have this beautiful solution to the problems of the humanity, to climate change. And then I tell them, I dare you to go and implement a discrete choice experiment so that you quantify the number of people who are interested, but more importantly, the number of people who actually dislike your solution. And they think, well, how will they dislike my solution if it solves the problem? Well, usually what happens is, even we in the social sciences are thinking on solving a problem from a technical point of view, or as economists, from a optimal Pareto efficiente point of view. But guess what? Our fellow citizens, our fellow colleagues, our fellow classmates, for whatever reason, may not like our beautiful solution. And that is what this instrument is about. You have something that you want to test, and you want to know how much they like it, how much they dislike it. And then you have to do something with that, And that's where we are going to end up aggregating preferences. Okay. I hope that you are following me and that I am being clear. I am about to start with the slides and go a little bit more into detail, but I really like to start with this kind of general introduction, general conversation. So that's, I set the table from the very beginning. And one thing I like to say within the first 20, 30 minutes of the presentations is the limitation of these methods. So that I get it out, right? Just get it out, there is a limitation, everything has a limitation, let's discuss it, let's say it, you write it down, and then I say the typical, well, but we are not going to cover that in these 5 days, later on you will have to deal with that. But, you know, it's an introductory type of course, it's intensive, and I aim for you to learn to do a discrete choice experiment to test your first, to take your first steps towards designing a discrete choice experiment. So I am not going to spend too much time on the limitations, but it's a good idea to set them up front. Because I already talked, and we already talked a lot about the beauty, but let's always try to be a little bit more balanced. There is one important limitation, not only of discrete choice experiments, but of non-market valuation methods. I am going to discuss it later on, but discrete choice experiment is a type of general methods that are called non-market valuation that deal with the values of services or goods that are yet to be in the market, right? That they don't have a market, they exist, or they are there, but they don't have a market, or that we are thinking about them and they don't have a market yet. There are contingent valuation, there are discrete choice experiments in the stated preference side of the equation. And in the revealed preferences, we have hedonic prices and travel cost. All these methods have one little problem, which is they really are partial equilibrium models. What do I mean by that? You will see in one of the examples I'm about to present. We ask our respondents in our surveys, how much will you pay if in increasing bill of the electricity if the electricity came from a renewable source? We have done that in Mexico. They do a lot in USA and in Europe. And then imagine that they come out with a number, $5 per kilowatt, I will be willing to pay. And then you go and really take very seriously and put in context how much that $5 is. You say it seems reasonable. I'm going to communicate it to the corresponding authority of the energy agency. You know, you do your policy recommendations and everything. The main assumption in these models is that that's the only market that changes in a moment. That there is no general equilibrium considerations to consider. Because once that market changes, right, the complements and the substitutes are going to change, and then there is going to be all the chain of events that we already know as very good economists we are. And then in the end, there are going to be other effects in other markets that may end up impacting how much you really are willing to pay for renewable energy. But we are not able to model that with discrete choice experiments. Not that we could not. That could be a nice research agenda later on, because I have thought about it. We should be able to implement discrete choice experiment in key markets in the different sectors in the general equilibrium model, and then use them as blocks informing the general equilibrium model. But we haven't done it, so that's a research agenda that we could follow. But so far, that is something that we don't do with discrete choice experiments. You are able to inform what will happen in that specific market that you model. And whenever someone asks you, well, yeah, but what is going to happen in the general economy if this really is implemented, we get quiet. We don't have too much to say. We could say some things, and we will be discussing that later on, but that's one limitation. The other limitation, I'm going to be upfront, is that it remains hypothetical. It is a survey-based mechanism, a survey-based methodology that is going to ask people, between this and this, what will you prefer at this price? And you will see that we will make our best effort to make it incentive compatible and to make it policy consequential, which are two words that you have to remember by the end of the week. Incentive compatible, that people are incentivized to really say the truth, and policy consequentiality, that people believe that their opinions or their preferences are going to end up informing a policy. If we make those two things and we follow protocol, that's the best that we can do to argue that we are simulating a market as good as possible in the context that there is no market, because that's basically what we do. But you will hear over and over and over, and whenever you try to publish your papers, the reviewer is going to be like, this is hypothetical. I prefer reveal preferences. I prefer that you answer this question with data that is already available, because people already are reporting their preferences in those markets. So it's hypothetical. And then we also have ways to defend ourselves. But those two are big limitations in the method. And the one, of course, that I respond in terms of hypothetical nature is, well, yeah, but tell me which one to use when you are creating an innovation. There are some reveal preference methods that can be used, but sometimes there is no data. And then there is one limitation that I would like to mention also at the very beginning of the reveal preferences, that you are not going to hear that conventional econometricians say too much. Conventional econometricians love reveal preferences. They say, well, let's have the data. What the data say? Let's see the data in the market. What does it say? Any of you can think on a limitation of, for instance, the water market data. So imagine that. I'm going to give you more the example in my country, because it's the one that I know more. But I will imagine that you have a similar situation. In Mexico, we have the residential consumers and the agricultural consumers of water. And we can observe, if we are able to gather the information, how much they consume per month, in some cases per week. And we are able to observe how much they pay. And depending on the range of your consumption, the price goes from very subsidized to not so subsidized. So if you are in a low level of consumption and relatively poor, you pay very little in Mexico, and you are upper middle income class or very rich, you pay more, but still is subsidized. So imagine that you are able to access that data, and you model the demand for water, so that you can estimate the price elasticity for water, and therefore you can estimate how much people value 1 liter of water. What is the big problem with that data if you are interested on the value of water for people? Louder?
Like diamond water paradox. There's one paradox for diamond water.
Oh,
the person who is not having the thing will having more preference to that. So if I have more money, so obviously I will not care about what is the price. But if I don't have, then I will care about it.
Well, that is one limitation that is rooted in the feature of the data that I would like you to identify. Not that you are wrong, but I want you to identify one feature in this data that the econometricians overlooked. Probably I didn't explain it very well, so I want to answer myself. The problem with this data, when people model demand for water in this context, or for energy, or for whatever kind of context where there is this subsidized situation, is that we are not observing the range of prices that should be observed. The range of prices are here. You are going to be modeling the price elasticity in a subsidized market, and what you are describing happens here. In a non-subsidized market, the prices will vary like this, and therefore you will be observing more realistic reaction to changes in prices when you calculate the elasticity, the price elasticity. So whenever, I'm going to assume that after this week, every one of you is going to do a discrete choice experiment. And whenever people tell you, well, but that is very hypothetical. One, you should not do it too hypothetical because then you are doing it wrong, for sure. But two, every time that you think on your application, think on whether there is reveal data, reveal preference data, that could help you, one. And two, think whether the prices in the specific market are really covering all feasible range of values. Because if they are not, that's where discrete choice experiments come as one of those very beautiful tools that basically, through simulating the market, you could expand the range of prices in the discrete choice experiment. You will see later on in the examples, but that is one of the beauties of this method.
So, is everyone able to hear?
Oh, sorry.
Audio at the back? Yeah?
Am I speaking without the...
So, is this a mic or what? Yes, that's a mic. That's a mic?
You hear me? I usually don't use mic and I tend to yell, but if you don't hear me, I can...
Yeah. For online, this should be working.
Okay, well, okay, this one is working online, but then should I use this for here? But you should have told me before. There. Okay. So that is one of the beauties of the method. You could play with the range of prices. So you could complement reveal preferences. Not only you can use discrete choice experiments or no market valuations or stated preference methods to value things that are not in the market, but if you find contexts in which the market doesn't cover all the prices, that means that then the market is not covering all the behaviors that can potentially be observed. So the discrete choice experiment helps you to complement reveal preferences by expanding the range of prices. Okay, so that was the long introduction without a... I tend to not use too many of these because I like to talk. Anyway, so a discrete choice experiment, my definition of a discrete choice experiment that also applies for continued evaluation is a discrete choice experiment is the simulation of a market that doesn't exist, or that if it exists, you could kind of play with the range of prices. You expand the market. In order to infer what will be the value that people will attach to the good or service at hand. And I really like to use that definition because it goes into the essence. When I am talking to non-economists, I usually tell them, I know that you don't like to hear that some economists like me put value to biodiversity, to conservation. They get really mad at me. And I really like to teach to those students because they get mad at me, and I like to create passions there. But I tell them, you will not disagree that a microbiologist uses Petri dishes as their laboratory. All of you know what the Petri dish is, right? You go, you take a sample, and then you put in this kind of gel, and then you put it in the fridge, and you come back 2 days, 3 days later. You see the color, the structure of the colonies that grow. You identify the type of microbe, and then you start playing with them. No, you put a line in the middle to see how they grow, whether they grow or not. You are doing experiments. Well, the markets are the laboratory of the economist, right? Our microbes are ourselves, humans, and changes in prices are those experiments that sometimes are, or most of the times are actually exogenous to each individual, right? We don't decide most of the times when the prices are going to change. Now that Trump I am sure that many economists are pretty happy because now that Trump is doing what he's doing, he's doing an experiment for us to take advantage of, right? That's a beautiful experiment. Therefore, Mexicans, for instance, I am from Mexico, so economists in Mexico, we are thinking what we are going to be researching because he is doing, in the Petri dish, he's drawing a line in the colony. It is exogenous to the colony, it's exogenous to the Mexicans, so it's a beautiful, it's not a natural experiment, but it's a beautiful experiment. Anyway, that is the laboratory of the economist. Therefore, when we don't have markets to study the behavior of humans, we simulate them. That is discrete choice experiments. Otherwise, we don't have laboratories. Otherwise, we don't really know. That is the limitation. That is the epistemological limitation of neoclassical economics. And that's okay. It's the same that being a microbiologist and not having a Petri dish. I'm giving you tools to discuss with your biologists and ecologists colleagues, right? And that's what I tell them. After that, they remain quiet, and I'm like, I won the argument. So that is a discrete choice experiment, and that's why you should be interested in it. Because when you don't have the laboratory to study, you can create it. The other tool is contingent valuation. And I probably will talk a little bit later on about it, but you can think on discrete choice experiment as a generalization of a contingent valuation. Because in contingent valuation, usually you vary the price only. Okay. I think I talked enough without presenting you a nice example. You can see that, right? Let me see if I can do it full for the people online. Questions? There, okay. I'd like to present this example because I'm very proud of this exercise. And I think it's easy to understand. We presented to a sample of respondents who were or are office workers in Mexico City to a discrete choice experiment that looked like this. At the beginning, we explained to them, or we asked them to kindly imagine that their employer approached them and told them that they will have the possibility to choose to go into a hybrid arrangement in which they will work 2 days a week from a shared office, not from home, from a shared office. That they will get that chance in exchange of being discounted their paycheck in those amounts. And they could choose between the distance that they will have to travel to their shared office, how much they would like to give up from their paycheck a month, and whether they wanted to have a parking place, a safe parking place or not, in the building where they will be working from the office in those 2 days. So those 2 days they will be saving their commuting time, right? And their money. And you guys who live here in New Delhi, most of you in Delhi, probably will not object that it does not seem too unfair to ask people to give up some of their paycheck in exchange of saving what they already are paying in time and money for commuting. That was the idea back then. And the reason why I'm very proud of this is because we didn't do this in the COVID-19. COVID-19 started in Mexico in February 2020. And it really didn't start in China in December 2019? We did the first round of this questionnaire in the last week of November 2019 and the first week of December 2019. And we prepared it for 6 months. So we were ahead of our times for 6 months. Later on, we link this to COVID-19, but the original idea was, and still is, and I want to talk later on about it because I want to relate it to public policy. The original idea was, why not we try to take advantage of this type of situation, of hybrid arrangement, to make Mexico less congested? If people are interested, if employers are interested, because we have a survey on employers as well, how much interested are they? How many people will want to engage in this? And based on that, how many people will get out of commuting every day? And what will that be the impact on congestion? And what will that be the impact on pollution? And what will that be the impact on individuals' well-being and their neighborhoods' well-being? That is the research agenda. We started with this. So people have to decide between how far they want their share office, whether they would like to go by bike or not, and whether they want to give up $350 or $35 a month. In this case, they can always choose neither option, which basically will mean they are perfectly fine with the option of going every day to their office. You may wonder, why is that? We didn't offer them to work from home. Or you may not wonder anymore right now, right? You live COVID-19. And I am just assuming Delhi is similar to Mexico City in the fact that working from home and having Zoom meetings while the dog or the kids or your mother or your father or all those things happen, right? That was the same logic for Mexico City. Privacy, lack of internet connection, and a lot of other things make working from home very difficult in Mexico City. That's how we came out with the idea of what if we invent this situation in which a shared office is close enough to your house. Where close enough, think about it, in this discrete choice experiment is endogenous. People will decide what they prefer, how far they want to go, and how much money they want to give up, right? In this discrete choice experiment, and again, I'm just giving you the introduction that later on I'm going to elaborate, but I'm giving this introduction because I want to keep you in your mind the policy implication of this discrete choice experiment. In this discrete choice experiment, people, one person at a time, can tell me, I will prefer to walk 15 minutes and give up $100. And someone is going to be like, I prefer to walk 30 minutes, but I only want to give up $20, right? That's your payment. You pay with money or you will pay with time. Well, once I have the answers, what am I going to do and what are we doing? We are aggregating by neighborhood, right? Once you have that information by neighborhood, you are able to calculate the optimal location of the shared office, of the office workers living in that neighborhood. And then from there, we will know how many people will want to go there every day and what will be the impact on the congestion and blah, 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 blah. You can probably at this stage infer that I am not able to do any of those other things. Well, that's where I want you to start thinking on the discrete choice experiment as this beautiful tool that can get you as far. What will be the output of your discrete choice experiment? And who will be using it to do what? In this case, I have the proportion of people per, it's not neighborhood to tell you the truth, it's per, it's bigger than neighborhood, given the sample size. That wants to go 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour. And how much are they valuing their time? With that, I gave that information to my colleague who is, I never know how to say, logistics optimizer person. You know, the people who know how to design routes of transportation, who is working with those numbers to know where should we locate those shared offices to maximize the welfare of the office workers in Mexico, right? So I'm describing it very slowly because I like to brag about my research agenda, of course, but also because I want you to understand the steps. You are going to design a discrete choice experiment. You are going to have very clear what comes out from the discrete choice experiment. And you have to have very clear who is going to take those as inputs in their modeling to take you together where. We want to meet with the office, government office in charge of labor, environment, and transportation to see if they are interested on this type of policy. My colleague in Mexico, who is also an economist, with whom we published this paper, he just identified the right context. Right now, the Mexican governor, the Mexico City governor, she's very interested in this policy that she calls, I forgot the name, but she basically is developing these meetings to imagine the futures. That probably is the closest translation. And then my colleague told me, you know what, that could be the excuse. Why not we tell her that those meetings should happen around here? If she wants people to reimagine the future of their neighborhoods, we should tell them, what if part of that reimagining your neighborhood includes a shared office here? Will that be something that interests you? And you know, we are just shooting to the air, but that's where I would like you to also shoot. Imagine your policies to tackle big problems, and then think how you could take it step by step. This is one step. We are going to be discussing, and right now I am going that big because I want to give you that connection between discrete choice experiment, preferences, policies. I am not going to pretend that the discrete choice experiment is going to be the only tool that you need to learn to inform policies. But I want to believe that it's a very important tool that is going to give you an idea of where are people thinking, what are they thinking, where they want to go. And with that, if you are very clever, you are going to try to use those as inputs in those policies. Questions? Reactions? No? Okay. You don't have to, but you know, as we move on, you probably have to start thinking on your own discrete choice experiment, and I will be very happy if one of you react and say, okay, my discrete choice experiment more or less is looking like this, or my topic is like this. Another thing I want to emphasize with this exercise is that this exercise, if you realize, has to do with transportation. It has to do with value of time. It has to do with environment if we actually take it to the level of that design of optimal networks, right? It has almost to do also with energy, because at some point, if you were going to design those shared offices, you will want them to be energy efficient, right? So the topic can be as big and as related to climate change as you want it. Right now, I am encouraging you to think very interdisciplinary. And then in the way you start thinking, what colleagues are you going to be inviting to the conversation, because you cannot do this by yourself. You are only an economist. I usually come to the conversation and I say, people present themselves, well, I am a biologist, and then later on I did a master in blah, blah, and then I did a PhD in forestry. And then I start by saying, I am only an economist, because my bachelor is economics, my PhD is economics, I am only an economist. But you should be very good at thinking how you can inform all those policies, because those colleagues that have all the solutions don't know what people are thinking, don't know what people prefer. And therefore, their solutions require your tools. Okay, a good discrete choice experiment, you probably can infer it from here, and because several of you are economists, already are intuitively saying it or thinking it. but we need to say it aloud. A good discrete choice experiment presents people with trade-offs. If you go and read some applications in the psychological literature, for instance, they call discrete choice experiments, and they present something similar. But my main criticism to psychological applications is that they are not presenting people to trade-offs. They're presenting them to only improvements. What do you prefer between a scenario 1 and a scenario 2, where both of them are improvements in all 3 attributes? That is not a discrete choice experiment. A discrete choice experiment has to have something that you prefer, for instance, being closer home, potentially having a bike to go home, and something that you dislike so much, giving up your money. That is a trade-off. If you don't think on discrete choice experiment that clearly have a trade-off, you are not doing a good discrete choice experiment. But here is the good news for those of you who may want to engage in this type of thinking. The main criticism that my colleagues that are not economists have for economists is that we only think on money. We only think on money. And go and see the applications in economics, and of course, 99% of the applications are how much will you give up of your money in exchange for blah, blah, blah. And 1 to 2% of them are how much of your time will you be willing to give up for this or for that. But because we are economists, we know that time is time is money, so we translate whatever you are willing to give up in time to money easily by knowing how much you will be making in 1 hour of salary. No? So we are thinking only on money. But I am very happy to have found one application that I think is a good illustration of a good trade-off that doesn't have money. And it's not random that I found it with colleagues in psychology, who are the ones who are very unwilling to put money in their discrete choice experiments. So we were in this context. Let me tell you the context. And again, all this storyline is so that you start thinking on your public policies, okay? Or who is going to be your end user? Because that is going to define your attributes. And that is going to define the structure of your discrete choice experiment. So they approached me and they said, hey, they're from Switzerland. When I did my postdoc there, we had a very good relationship, so we keep working together. And they said, look, we have the opportunity to do a discrete choice experiment in this neighborhood of Basel, which is a city in Switzerland. And the neighborhood is kind of in the middle, in an area where they want to have more urban green, but they don't have where to get more urban green. Does that sound familiar? A lot of the literature, even in economics, but also in environmental psychology and other areas, talk about increasing urban green and how beautiful is urban green and how everyone should have more green. And I always wonder, yeah, but where are we going to get the green in Mexico City, in the neighborhood where I grew up? Well, the cool thing when they approached me was, they said, there is this neighbor association who already came out with 3 potential measures to increase the green in a context where there is no land to increase the green. But they have been discussing, and they think that some people will be willing to reallocate parking spaces so that instead of parking cars, you will put trees. They are willing, some of them are willing to give up their building facades. And some of them think that we should reduce the lane so that it only becomes 1 lane, actually like a S lane. And we put green, we put trees. With the great advantage that if the cars go slow also, not only we have more green, but also it's more safe it's safer for people walking. At the very beginning, I didn't realize I should say. So I said, okay, that's beautiful. We need to put the money, right? Like any economist, I thought, well, sure. Now the question should be, how much of urban green do you want more in your neighborhood? and how much you are willing to exchange for this, and money. And my psychology colleagues opposed it, and they said, no. Why will they be giving up money if they are already giving up space? And that's when it hit me. This is a beautiful trade-off, right? And more when you realize people really value their parking spaces in those cities, right? In these cities and in Mexico City, having a parking spot is like having gold. So that's when I gave up the suggestion of putting money. Because this is a good discrete choice experiment because it truly is presenting people with trade-offs and it doesn't have money. And I will be talking about it in the coming days. I just wanted to put it there as an example, but just a little piece. People of these three, what do you think they were more willing to give up and less willing to give up? Parking space, facade, or lane? Who will you think? If we were going to implement this in your neighborhood, what will be the one that they will not want to give up easily or the least easily? And which one will be the one that they will be willing to give up the most easily?
I think the speed and lane reductions in low-paid areas might be the one option that people will be more willing to give up. I mean, it's also like a very personal trade-off to make. So as you said, in a congested city like Mexico City or even certain parts of Delhi, giving up a parking space is also like losing a part of land, which is very crucial to you, especially if you own more than one car.
Exactly.
So speed and lane reduction might be, again, something that people will be willing to give because speed not as big of an issue. But then if the lane reduction happens and also like lesser parking space and all those things as well. But yeah, I feel like relocating parking spaces would be the one thing that you would be less willing to give. Same with the building facade.
My hypothesis was that they will be more willing to give facade. I thought that should be DAY-1. And then I thought parking space for sure they will not give. But you got it right in the one that sheet they got. They were more willing to give up lanes. Among other things, because in the context of that neighborhood, and you said it right, here I think that it will intersect with parking. But in that neighborhood, they have specific places for parking that are not on the lanes, or on the road. So when you give up road, you don't give up parking. But the one that really surprised me was they were not happy about giving up facade. That really blew my mind. But then later on, knowing more about the context, because again, I am only the economist, so I do the survey and I do the analysis and throw the results. I need context. And that is what I am going to emphasize about the mixed method approach of this. This cannot be a regular regression. Don't treat it as a regular regression. You cannot come up with the conclusions and say, well, therefore, they don't like to give up facades. Talk to your colleagues who are in the field and who are in the field doing the semi-structured interviews, but also that are in other scientific fields. And that's when I understood what happens is that you're very attached to the historical value of their facades. Either real, but in this case, mostly perceived. And that's where psychology and economists have to talk. Because strictly speaking, it's not like it is the most historical neighborhood. But they feel so proud of kind of by association being part of the historical or the pretty neighborhoods that they didn't want to give up their facades. Right? So I want to emphasize that kind of conversation that this type of studies give you the opportunity. If you design your discrete choice experiments in conversation with your other colleagues, when you run your regressions and come out with the conclusions, go and talk again with them to say, how do we make sense of this? And then that's where I learned values, whether we like it or not, really are influenced by psychology, right? They perceive it as important, even when if you come with an objective measure of how historical their facades are, It's not like, wow. But if they perceive it, they perceive it. If they assign more value to facade than to parking spaces, that was pretty good result. And we are in the writing of the paper. So one other thing in this case is, give me a second, I was going to tell you. Oh yeah. In these two examples, I want to emphasize how do you come out, and then this is what I will say is starting to really slowly but surely going into the method. One of the important questions you should be asking right now is, so how do you come up with the attributes? Actually, I have not even defined attributes, right? An attribute is one of those characteristics that are presented here in in vertical. We call attributes those characteristics. The characteristics that they have to trade. Or the characteristics that define the good that you are trying to sell in this simulated market. Those are attributes. And then every value, every level, we call it level, that each attribute take, right? You have to decide the attributes and the levels of those. The question that you should be asking yourself is, how do I do that? Why is that I didn't put 20 more? Or in this one, believe me, this is very simple. And that was one of the comments of the reviewer, of the editor. This is too simple. You are not considering all the important things in the decision. And the trade-off is, you could do it as realistic as you want, but then it's going to be 40 attributes, right? Who of us can mentally manage comparing goods over 40 attributes? So defining the number and the attributes in a specific and their levels is a qualitative exercise. There is absolutely no quantitative skill there. You have to go and do semi-structured interviews. And this is so new for some of the econometricians. I don't know exactly your profile, but I do know the profile of my classmates when I was in my bachelor. And then when I was in my PhD, most of those didn't know about semi-structured interviews or focus groups. And most of us thought that was a joke. If you don't run a regression and comes in the coefficients, then you are talking bananas. Well, in this method, if you don't do your semi-structured interviews and your focus groups to identify out of the 20 relevant attributes that you first identified to literature review, which one are you going to keep? Then you are not doing a good job, because what happens is that then you implement your discrete choice experiment and the regression is not going to lie. It's going to say, no one pay attention to this attribute. There is a literature, a very technical literature, the non-attendance attribute, that I personally have a very specific opinion. Because if your discrete choice experiment is telling you that people didn't pay attention to the attribute, it's because you did not design your discrete choice experiment correctly. Ideally, you are putting all the attributes that matter to most of the people, because you did your focus groups and your semi-structured interviews well. So that is the first thing that you should be already learning right now here. One, once you identify your question, go and do literature review to see what attributes have been considered in the previous literature, in the previous studies, and do semi-structured interviews in the context where you are going to do your study to see which attributes people are thinking that probably were not identified in other literature, in previous literature, and which one of those that were identified in previous literature matter in the context that you are implementing. And then later on, you have to pilot to see if people more or less react to all your attributes. So for instance, I don't have the other instance here. Let me see. No, okay, I'm going to talk about other instances later. So That's how you will come to a design of this type. Literature review, semi-structured interviews, focus groups, based on your question. Okay? Questions on your side. Do you need a break? Do I need a break? When do we take a break officially?
Yeah, maybe in about 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. Very good. So,
So if you want, you can have 10 minutes of question answer.
yeah, let's open the floor now. Questions? Yes.
When you spoke about identifying the attributes,
Yes.
so you spoke about identifying the attributes from the literature and then going on the ground, having the focus discussion, and then also identifying the new attributes. And then you spoke that, and you go on the ground again to do a pilot and see if how the people react. So,
Exactly.
how do you explain like, how do they react? As in, you ask some questions or like what?
Thank you. Very good question. I can gather probably one more and then maybe try to see if I answer it both. Yes? I didn't mind walking. It's a good exercise.
Thank you, sir, for this presentation. So this is a very new topic to me. So first, I wanted to understand that. So we also take the survey of the people that what they want, what the choices are. So how is it different from that? And second question is that you talked about that people perceive certain value to some things. So does there is a pre-experiment or pre-pilot kind of like pre-survey? Wouldn't it be better to provide such choices that they can more willing to give up or take?
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
The first question, can you repeat the first question again?
First question is that we also do survey for knowing the choices that what people like or what people want. So how this is different from that, or is like is the same incorporating different methods or what?
So my question is, you said about we are selecting the attributes, right? So you showed 4 attributes you have selected. So my question is, did you start with 40 and then you went to 4? Because if you start with 40 and then you can apply like an PSM, like principal component analysis or something like that, and then you can select on to the 4, then you can know these are the main variables which are important. Because how can I know without going and like selecting a list of things? Because the person who I will be interviewing, he will not know the context directly like these are important. That I need to identify like these are the 40 questions may be important, then I can cut it down and come to 4 or 5. So is that the process?
I'm going to go over it. I think that Sangeeta had a question. Yeah. Did you want to participate?
Yeah.
My question was that the reason we include prices as one of the attributes is because we want something that has a uniform unit and we can convert everything in willingness to pay. So in your psychology example, so how do we
Yeah,
go about
that's a good question. I want to. Okay. Yes. Okay. Let me answer. Is it related?
Yes, related.
Okay, if it is related, yeah, so that I answer them. It's more or less also about that part, yeah. Yeah, we can give her the...
So my question was basically about like the ideal. So when we're talking about these decision choices, and in one of these situations, at least in one of them, all the attributes align to something that is ideally what we want. Ideally, like if we were talking about transportation itself, there is a transport like expert who's doing the planning, who knows that this probably makes the most sense in whatever urban planning center they have. So my question, and I did last semester, I did a geography paper that like talked about multiple choice decision making models, and like so many different ones over there. And I believe, I can't remember exactly, but there was one that specifically talked about like an ideal situation. How do you reach the ideal situation? So do you also try to find that, like when you're doing a multidisciplinary research, do you have one option that's like the ideal and then you go on with the rest?
Okay. Did you have a question?
So I think all questions are about
Mhm.
attributes, and I think my colleague also has a similar question as how do you choose how many options and how many attributes?
Yeah. I think that one more there, and then we go for answer. Okay. Here in the right? Oh, okay. Sorry. We will have more opportunity for you.
Good afternoon. My question is, while we are choosing the attributes, there could be some personal bias also. Like some attributes we feel are good, and we might try to convince the person who is the respondent, and we might give emphasis to certain attributes while doing our survey. So how do we make sure that this doesn't happen?
Yeah. Okay. So I should say that today. Yeah. I'm glad that there are questions.
Yeah.
I'm glad that there are questions. That is a good. That's always good.
Sir, my question is about that both the choice experiments that you showed us. So every attribute have a particular number of alternatives, and all the alternatives are same. Like there are 2 alternatives in all the attributes. So like, is it?
You are a little bit ahead. You are asking about the design. How do we create the options, right? You want to know. Is that?
Yeah.
That is. I'm going to definitely answer that question because it's one important component.
Okay.
I think that we are going to make a little bit of that today, but mostly tomorrow.
Okay, done.
But definitely, you want to know. So how do I come up with those alternatives? No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right now, we are going to be deepening a little bit more on attributes and levels. And then a little bit today, but mostly tomorrow, we are going to be discussing. So how do we create these alternatives that we are going to be presenting? Okay. Let me answer this, and then we still have a few hours to. Oh, there is a micro there. Okay. I keep chasing the micro. Yeah.
My question was actually regarding something that our professors keep pointing out in class whenever we are reading papers. So they say that whenever you are like undertaking a research that's supposed to inform policy, you should see if the experiment is actually externally valid. And making a DC externally valid seems like a huge task because it will be really expensive to do it at that scale. So how is that issue addressed if we want to we want our research to inform policy?
That's an excellent question. The last 2 questions, your question, I am going to elaborate tomorrow. But if you could, and if all of you could, one of the papers that I put in the list is the paper on the transportation journal. The paper reporting this experiment is with my colleague Lara Pulido Lara. Go to the section of policy conversations, and please read it because that's where we do the attempt to do external validity checking. And I point out that one because I am very proud of reporting one number there that comes from reveal preferences. Because what you just said really touches a very important point. But read that part of that paper, everyone, if possible. And the other one, the working paper with Charu and Sangeeta, also the policy component, where we related to the work by Blackman. Read those 2, because those are going to show you how we aim for external validity, because that's a big challenge for these studies. Okay. And we are going to go back. So if at some point again you see me wandering on studies, bring me back to that question and to your question, please. Okay. So in terms of design, what I'm about to tell you is the ideal. If you ask me or my colleagues how much of the ideal, sometimes we do or we don't. In practice, it's difficult to go step by step or to not make mistakes. But here is what I have learned over the years. a good, if you're a PhD student, I think that this can be a 1-year process. You can divide it in 1 year. And then the first month and a half, 2 months, I will heavily dedicate it to literature review, where you will be searching for contexts in which they did something similar or something identical, and you will be listing all the attributes that they consider. Then I will go to fill those with semi-structured interviews. Ideally, 10 semi-structured interviews. 10 semi-structured interviews with people who are very much engaged in the topic. So for instance, if you want to do something like what Charu did for her PhD, you can go and talk to people who are thinking on buying a car. And you want to start very open. So I know that you are in the market right now trying to buy a car. What characteristics are you considering? What are the criteria that you are considering? What are the most once they come out with 10, with 20, with whatever they come out, you say, well, and what are the most important when it comes to really, really nailing it? Because of course, someone is going to say color. Let me tell you, when it comes to money, when they tell you, is this model in white and it costs 20,000 cheaper, you go for that, right? Even when you don't love the color. At least I know of people who do that, and I have done that. So color doesn't go. At the very beginning, people are going to list you to give you 20 attributes. Then you have to go and say, so when it comes to really, really in the end, what are going to be the 5 ones that really matter for you? No, but these ones, okay. Now I am putting the example of Charu because of the following. Many of the times in research, we are interested, for instance, on attributes that reflect efficiency in the energy use. And if you do this semi-structured interview, this is a very good example, because if you do the literature review and you list the attributes in the literature review, 95%, 99% of the papers are going to be considering energy efficient attributes. And now go and do the semi-structured interviews. How many people do you really think that they allow? Yeah, I want to be considering the efficiency of the car heavily. Unfortunately, at least for the case of Mexico, very few. So that is where you put your bias. Who talk about biases? Your bias becomes, I always say to my students that it's okay to be biased. What is not okay is to be unconscious of your biasness, because actually, if you think about it, your research questions always are going to reflect a bias to begin with. Kind of your wish. You kind of wish that people are paying attention to energy efficiency. So there you say, okay, for the 20 and then the 5 that you mentioned to me, have you ever considered fuel efficiency? Well, yeah, sure. And then you explain, well, you know, fuel efficiency is kind of important because it actually gives you savings depending on the use that you provide, right? And then people kind of start thinking in those terms. But if you think about it, many of the cases that we do are going to explicitly or implicitly introduce the bias of the researcher, or the wishes, practically. And that is a good example. Many people are not thinking on efficiency when they are buying cars or appliances or many other things that researchers are thinking on. And that also has to do with technical innovations or solutions to climate change, for those of you who might be interested in those type of topics. Farmers might or might not be thinking on water efficiency. You might try to be selling this technology that uses water efficiently, and they don't have it in their radar. Keep in mind the following term that we are going to introduce in the coming days, a split sample. Because to me, in the context of discrete choice experiments, designing a good split sample is the way to give a space to your bias or to your research question, or to your wish. So the split sample is going to be half of the people you are going to present it to a discrete choice experiment that comes from literature review, for instance. And half of them, you are going to tell them something that you wish make them more interested in energy efficiency. And you want to see whether it's scaring them or motivating them or providing information, right? Information treatments, or nudging them will get them to be more interested in the attribute that you are considering. So I'm going to go back to the general answering of the general question. Think on a 1 year, if you are a PhD student, project. The first 2 years you do your interview, your literature review. The next month, 2 months, the first 2 months you do your literature review. The next month you do your semi-structured interviews, focus groups. The third month, you already have defined a subgroup of attributes and levels that you are going to be testing on 20 people. Already with this design, when you approach the semi-structured interview people, the first 10, you don't need to have this design in mind clearly, but you do need to have a list of attributes. But when you approach for the piloting, you need to approach 20, 30 people with a design in mind like this. And then there is where you are going to know. Because you are going to be running preliminary regressions analysis on that 25 answers. And that's where you are going to realize no one is paying attention to bicycle. And you will have to reiterate. Maybe if you are very interested in keeping it, maybe you rephrase it. Maybe you go and see if there is another way to present it. Or if you are not that interested, you thought it was just part of what it could be included, you drop it. And if people in that piloting tells you, I kind of wish you put this thing, this attribute, you will have to consider, should I bring back one attribute that I didn't consider at this stage? And then you will need to pilot one more time, right? So by the 6th month, you should have ready the one that you are going to implement. You implement it in the 7th, and then you have 5 to 4 months.
I think it's time for break. So.
Okay, sorry. I just kept talking. Thank you, Sangeeta, because I love to talk.
Oh, wow, that pollution one, or even.
We have at least 15 minutes for them. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming back. So we will resume now. Okay, so I was really happy with the questions. And I hope you have more questions. And I actually hope that I didn't answer all your questions, because the more questions you have, the more doubts, the more you are thinking about it. Before we go back, we go out to our places today, I will randomly point out someone to see if that someone has an example of discrete choice experiment in a context that they would like to be thinking about, okay? Just to start engaging you and also to start giving you a little bit of a quick reaction. But of course, hopefully you have enough time today and tomorrow in the morning to do a literature review, a quick literature review, and then a quick semi-structured interview with your parents, with your friends, right? There is always someone in the family who is interested or is related to the topic. And then tomorrow you come out with a subset of attributes that you think are relevant in the context that you are thinking, okay? Just that quick. Something dirty and fast, nothing that I will be judging for precision, but more for engagement. So I am going to start the second part with something that is more what is related to the econometrics itself. And the good news is that if you do well your work, there are two words that should not come out in your analysis. You should not be worried about, that econometricians, we are all the time worried about. One of them is multicollinearity, and the other one is endogeneity. Those two things should not come out and will not come out if you do your job well. So that is kind of the trade-off. You do a lot of work, pre-work to the data set, to the gathering, and if you do it well, actually, you will not have to do post-analysis work. Not that you don't have to analyze it and pay attention, but a lot of the analysis when it comes out to doing a good instrumental variable approach is the instrumental variable, right? I mean, this is a 2-year project where you spend 1.5 years estimating the instrumental variable. That's all what it's about. So in this case, no. In this case, it's a 1-year project where once you gather your data, you run your conditional logic, your mixed logic versions, and your latent class logic. Not that it's that easy, but it is what it is. I am, and no reviewer is going to be criticizing your work if you didn't control for endogeneity. Why? Let's see if you guys, I know that several of you are already consummated econometricians, so you probably should have some intuition of why. Imagine that I have a sample of 1,000 office workers that I presented this choice car is called, and I presented 9 of them or 7 of them in this way with different alternatives each time. And then they told me which one they prefer, okay? That is the general description of a discrete choice experiment. Why is that when I analyze the answers, the discrete answers that they provide to this exercise, why do you think that I should not be thinking on endogeneity? Who has an intuition? You are sleepy because you just had.
Our econometrics class. We should be able to.
It's okay. If I can repeat it just because I know that people get scared, but I ask people, a sample of 1,000 people, to give me their preferred option here, right? Either you prefer A, you prefer B, or you prefer C, which is nothing. And I ask you actually 7 times, because I present you 7 of these different choice cards to each of you. So I have 7 of answers of each of you times 1,000, because I have 1,000 of you. And I am going to run a regression. Whatever regression you are we are going to be discussing, but whatever regression I run, there is no need to control for endogeneity. So my question is, why will I not be controlling for endogeneity? And that goes to the core of what econometrics is. One question that you could ask yourself, and sometimes some very conventional econometricians have asked me, they say, where is the econometrics here? This is statistics. Is this econometrics, they ask me. And I very happily say, yes, it is econometrics. Because I am controlling for endogeneity. Just not through the regression or at the regression stage. I control in advance. How? Well, it's very easy. I asked you to choose your preferred option, but you are not choosing together the outcome and the price. The prices that I present to you are exogenous to you. So you have to choose a bundle of alternatives. One of them is the price. But when you come to choose between these alternatives, it's not like, oh, well, I want this pizza at 10. It's if you want that pizza, the price is this. Or you want this pizza and the price is this. Which one do you want? Right? If you were able to say, I want a pizza with this, and I want to pay 10 pesos for it, $10, that is endogeneity. Endogeneity is when you are choosing your level of consumption at the same time that you are choosing your price. So we cannot say that there is a causal effect in that context because you are choosing both. In this case, we don't need to control because you are not choosing but what you are consuming at the given price. Of course, you choose the bundle, but you don't choose the price at which you are choosing the bundle. By you choosing different times in these choice sets, because I present 7 to you, I am able to know how much the price matters to you, relatively speaking, to the other attributes. And I'm going to answer actually the question that Sangeeta asked me because it reminded me. In this case, by you choosing different times in these choice sets, I am able to learn what are your preferences with respect to the parking spaces relative to your preferences for percentage of facade. So to answer your question, the way we are measuring in this case your willingness to pay is by estimating the rate of substitution, the marginal rate of substitution between parking spaces and percentage of green spaces. So there I am able to say for each 1% of urban green space increase in urban green space, this person is willing to give up a half of a parking space. That's marginal effect, marginal rate of substitution. And that is what I'm going to be talking to you later on. The beauty of these discrete choice experiments is, and when I started falling in love with the tool is, to me, to tell you the truth, is the simplest, easiest way to explain what a marginal rate of substitution is. Think about it. If I ask you to choose these between these options, and then again present you other choices set with these same characteristics, but other options, other goods, and so on and so on and so on, the econometric technique, what it does is infers how much green you want to have in exchange of giving up parking spaces. That is a marginal rate of substitution. You don't like that one? How much green do you want to have in exchange of 1% of your facade? Marginal rate of substitution. How much green do you want to have in exchange for giving up the lane? That is not marginal rate of substitution. That is rate of substitution, discrete choice, right? Discrete change in substitution. Those are marginal rate of substitution. I am sure that those of you who have studied economics have seen marginal rate of substitution to the end. I have to be very, very truthful. I didn't really grasp it until I started thinking in terms of discrete choice experiments. So another way to think on a discrete choice experiment is that it's a good tool to estimate marginal rates of substitution. Why do I describe it in that way? Because maybe that's the way that it clicks in you. Right? In the previous time I described it as that is a good way to simulate markets when there is no markets, or when there is a market that requires some expansion in the prices. Well, another way to think about it is a beautiful tool to estimate marginal rates of substitution. If you think in that way, maybe in your context, you are thinking very economically speaking, in marginal rates of substitution. Then you need to put two attributes that people have to trade, and then by put them to trade those attributes, you are going to be measuring marginal rates of substitution. So in this specific case, our willingness to pay is what it is. The willingness to pay, when we express it in dollars, is a marginal rate of substitution between dollars and your good. In this case, it's marginal rate of substitution between parking spots and urban green. whether it's money or it's not money, we can still make it money. But for the purpose of the paper, we keep it in marginal rate of substitution.
So this has more applications, right? So it can go beyond economics.
It can go way beyond economics. That's why I'm using this one, because those of you who might not be economists, or those of you who are economists that are going to have interdisciplinary conversations, or just so that someday you try to think in trade-offs beyond the monetary attribute, that's an example. Not that it's easy, because I haven't found another one actually. One of the contributions that we are going to claim is that this is the first discrete choice experiment that doesn't use money, but it still presents good trade-offs. Because I have seen some discrete choice experiments without money, that my criticism is that they put them to choose between goods. You know what I mean? Like they say, they choose between having green and having beautiful parking spaces. And what do you prefer, A or B? Well, if all of them are goods that I prefer, that's not real trade-offs. Okay. So that's why you don't have to be worried about endogeneity, because a discrete choice experiment doesn't let people choose endogenously. And that is another advantage of stated preferences, discrete choice experiments over revealed preferences, whether the conventional econometricians like it or not. Now, just to give you more ideas of where you could take your research and your applications, think about it. If you have a data set that doesn't have endogeneity, and you have another data set that does have endogeneity, and they are modeling similar situations, you can combine them to control for endogeneity in the revealed preference. One of the papers have been working for 5 years is trying to do that. Is modeling, is showing how we can do that. Control for endogeneity with discrete choice experiments. Because you don't have endogeneity in the stated preferences, and if you can replicate or more or less correlate the two situations, then you have an instrumental variable. As easy as that. So that is one thing that you should write down there. And I am not dealing with that here, but I have the working paper out there already online. In case that one of you approach me and I can share it with you, or I can direct you to it. I just didn't want to bring it here because it's not, for a 5-year course, it's not the main point, but I just want to throw the idea for those of you who are into playing with econometrics. Okay, and the other thing is collinearity. And that is where I'm going to spend a little bit more of time, because it has to do with your question of how do I design this? And then it has to do with the fact that then we don't have collinearity. Okay? So let's talk about the market of cars and the market of the real estate market, the houses. Those markets have crazy collinearity. Why? Because usually you don't have a sport car with a super powerful engine that at the same time is energy efficient or compact, right? It just doesn't go together. So on the other hand, you have compact cars that tend to be more energy efficient and tend to be slower. So you really cannot observe how much people will be willing to pay for a super fast compact car or for a super efficient race car. The same with houses, right? Houses tend to be either big and with pool and with all these amenities, or tend to be small and with none of those amenities. The segmentation is that clear. So there is not these combinations between, I want a small house but with a pool. That just doesn't exist, right? There is not out there in the market. So when you describe as a bundle the good call house or the good call car, in the real markets, there is a crazy collinearity. There is not enough variation to separate preferences for square meters and rooms, right? Ideally, when you run those type of regressions, and raise your hand if you are not following me, please. I am just assuming an initial level of regression understanding, okay? But if you don't follow me, raise your hand and I can go. Yeah.
This part, I think you can explain, elaborate a little.
Okay. So when you run a regression, ideally what you want to do, ideally, is to know how much people are willing to pay for extra square meter, but at the same time, for an extra room, no? I mean, you could have a big house with 2 rooms, or you could have that same house with 3 rooms. And some people will want to pay for the extra square, but some people will want to pay for the extra room, and some people want to pay for both. Now, the fact that in the market they kind of come bundled together, there is not too much more square with few, with more rooms or with less rooms. The fact that they come together means that when you run the regression, the collinearity doesn't allow you to impute values separately to square rooms, to square meters and rooms. Ideally, you wish you could. The other example is greenness or closeness to greenness. I am assuming that the market here in Delhi is very similar to the market in Mexico City. If you are close to Chapultepec, which is this beautiful big urban park in Mexico, the price goes to the roof. But at the same time, these are very luxurious or more luxurious houses. You are not going to find that luxurious house in Netzahualcoyotl, which is very much in the north, in a neighborhood where it just doesn't make sense that they will be building those apartments. So when you run the regression, you don't know whether the regression cannot tell you whether the apartment is very expensive because it's in front of the green, beautiful space, or because in itself is very luxurious. And of course, it's because of both. But the collinearity doesn't allow you to separate the coefficients. You put one or the other generally, right? But ideally, you wish you could, because those coefficients will reflect how much of the price of the apartment or the rent of the apartment is due to be close to green spaces or is due to the luxurious component.
If I just may add, we'll be more able to relate if we say that a colony where air pollution is low.
There.
Right? So those houses in South Delhi, they're more expensive. Is it because it's a luxurious colony or is it because air pollution is low? So that kind of separation our experiments would allow. Real data may not allow.
Exactly. Exactly. They come together. They are in a place where there is cleaner air and they are luxurious. You wish to see a luxurious one in a place where there was less clean air. And then you could run the regression and see how much it was because of the clean air. The other example that is very typical is education and income. Right? Do you have a better salary because you had your parents had education or because they had income? You don't know, because they come together usually. They are very collinear. And usually in those regressions that are called mean-set equations, for those of you who are experts on the labor economics, I think, you have to keep one or the other. Or do someone mentioned component analysis. You build an index of a principal component analysis to build an index of wealth of your family to begin with, right? That bundles income and education of your parents. So that's what we usually do with revealed preferences when it comes to collinearity. But in discrete choice experiments, we don't have collinearity. Why? Ideally, for the time being, we haven't discussed details, but for the time being, imagine that I already came out with my choice, with my design. We have 3 attributes. the distance to your house, which is going to take value 15, 30, and 1 hour, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, or 60 minutes. And then whether the office where you're going to be working has or has not safe biking spaces. And then the monthly discount, which is going to be 35, 100, 150, and 350, something like that. And I'm going to start answering your question. I define already 3 attributes and their levels. Ideally, think about it. In the ideal world, you want to combine every level of every attribute with the other attributes levels. Do you see what I mean? You combine all of them to create as many goods as artificially or hypothetically you could create by combining the attributes. Is everyone following me? Yes? I'm going to give a specific example, but well, let's do one. If you have 2 attributes and each attribute has 2 levels, you will be creating 2 times 2 for goods, hypothetical goods, right? So, and then you will present it to the person, the 4 of them, plus the alternative of choosing nothing, so 5 in total. And you will be asking to the person, please choose your preferred option from these 4 alternatives plus the status quo or the nothing option. Now you could start realizing how if I increase attributes or I increase levels, I am going to end up with 150 potential hypothetical goods plus the status quo. And maybe at this stage you can realize that that combination takes collinearity to 0, no? Because I am breaking collinearity by combining every single attribute and level with the other one. So collinearity is not an issue there. Now, what is the issue? Who of us can choose among 151 goods? Okay, here is 150 goods. Tell me which one is the one that you prefer. None of us can do that. That's why we came out with the concept of choice sets. A choice set, you have as many choice sets as you decide alternatives to put in a choice set of those 150. So for instance, if I have 150 potential hypothetical goods that have 0 collinearity, and I decide to put them in groups of 3, then I have 150 divided by 3, 50 choice cards, right? And then I present to you only 50 choice cards. I'm still in problem, no? Who of you wants to answer 50 times, right? Now choose this. Now see this and choose. Now choose the, after the 3rd, 4th, you are like, okay, what are we doing here? You just don't have the cognitive, none of us have the cognitive skills, not the skills, patience. It's more patience than anything else. Okay? So that is called choice sets. Then we create blocks. We say, okay, I'm not going to be crazy to present everyone with 50 choice sets. I'm going to create 5 blocks of 10 choice sets each. Do you see what I'm doing? I'm dividing the sets. Now, instead of having 50 that I'm going to present to each of you, I have 5. Each of them have 10 choice sets. And now, more or less, I could go and to each of you present 10, and then 10 different ones, block 2, block 3, block 5, until block 10. Does that make sense to you? Right? I could do the opposite. I could have in the previous one I had 10 choice sets in each block, so I had 5 blocks. But I could have 5 choice sets in each block and have 10 blocks, right? And then I present to each of you one of those blocks. And then I analyze the data, assuming that whatever answer that you presented, your neighbor is going to be answering more or less as if it was you, blah, 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 blah. That's the assumption behind. And it's called homogeneity preferences. And when we use conditional logic analysis, we assume homogeneity preferences. We are going to use mixed logic in some point, and then we are going to break apart that assumption. But to begin with, let's assume homogeneity preferences. Now we have then, that's basically what we do to answer your question. Once you have the attributes, the levels, you combine them all. You realize I have way too many potential goods, so I'm going to put them in choice sets. And then you say I have way too many choice sets, so I want to put them in blocks. And then I'm going to allocate randomly the blocks to my respondents. And they only see a subset of your 150 goods.
Is there any pattern in putting these in the sets or blocks that you're talking about?
As long as it is random, it's okay. Because the randomness implies that in one choice set, you don't put more or less than one of the attributes levels. So in average, they should be represented around the same kind of, the average trade-off. Okay. It will be bad if at some point I put you to choose only between the very good goods to you and then the very bad goods to you. But by doing it randomly, in average, I am presenting you to the same trade-offs, which is the important thing. Not that I am presenting you to the same alternatives in particular, but that those alternatives reflect, in average, the same trade-offs. Now, that is called full fractional design. Combining all against all is called full fractional design. Any of you have studied field experiments or experiments like, you know, I learned that when I once took a class of agronomy, and we were designing experiments in the field, and then basically you want to know how many treatments you have, and then with that you basically combine the treatments and you define how many parcels do you need to have. That is what we are doing here, full factorial design. That is what it is. The combination. And then after that, the generation of the choice sets, it's out of necessity because there is no human being that can handle 150 goods. And then the generation of blocks is the same, out of necessity. There is another type of design that is called fractional design. Fractional factorial design. And what it means is the following. You kind of can let go a little bit of the perfect orthogonality. The opposite of collinearity is orthogonality. That full combination means that the attributes, the variables are orthogonal among each other. The reason why I started explaining this with the reveal preferences and how reveal preferences are collineal, it's because going to this extreme is not that productive because you end up generating way too many alternatives that in many cases don't make sense. So the first step, once you generate your full factorial, is to go through your 100 alternatives and, once you generate your full factorial and put the choice sets, you check whether there are some alternatives that are fully dominated or that are dominating, which basically means if I come and offer you the most innovative alternative to raise, to do rice cropping at no cost, you are going to choose it. I'm giving you something in exchange of no price. So that should not be part of your design. And if there is one alternative that is just the worst alternative, I'm charging you the highest price, that can come out in the design, right? Because it depends on your levels and your attributes, and it is your responsibility to get them out of the design. So when you get them out of the design, what happens is that you are reducing the orthogonality of your design, or alternatively speaking, you are increasing the collinearity of your design, right? So when we start talking about that, your design is including a little bit of collinearity. So in the end, what you want to do is you want to have a fractional design that has lost perfect orthogonality, but doesn't have come out to a level where you should start getting worried about multicollinearity. Does that make sense? Are you following me? Because what happens when you are in this side is that you keep looking at the people who seems to be understanding you, and you don't realize that maybe someone is not understanding you. So please raise your hands. We have still 4 days ahead, so we can ask tons of questions. When we are on Thursday and we are on the clock, no more questions. No, not true. Well, anyway, so to summarize, discrete choice experiments should not be something that worries you, where you be worried about endogeneity, and that comes from the fact that people are not choosing their prices, and should not worry you about collinearity. But if you do it in practice, you are going to always have to bear a little bit of collinearity. But still, I go back to the initial point. The reason why I emphasize on the example of how reveal preference doesn't allow you to separate the coefficients is that the beauty of these studies is that you can find how much weight people put to each of the attributes that you are considering, something that you could not do in reveal preferences. You could not separate preferences for efficiency and engine size, because usually the engine size, the bigger, the less efficient, very collinear. Here, you are able to present, as we did in our experiment, high engine size and good efficiency, which in practice usually doesn't happen. So that is the part of econometrics. And the good news is, this is an econometric method. And I'm telling you this because I have faced those questions 2 times from very conventional econometricians. I didn't see the econometrics, one said. You are not controlling for endogeneity. How come is this econometrics? And my answer was, well, because I designed it from the beginning to not be worried about collinearity or endogeneity. That's how it is econometrics. It is not statistics because if it was statistics, it will be associations. But the associations come exactly from not being able to separate effects. No? That's why it's called a partial correlation. Okay. I wonder whether it's time to start letting you ask questions, and I am thinking on those in the audience yes, why not? I first start asking for questions in the audience that is online, so that we let them participate.
So, Prana, do you have those questions?
No, ma'am, right now.
Okay.
Have you asked them? You have?
Tell them that this is now or never. Yeah. We can take one. There is one? Okay, good. You can read it, and then I can answer from there so that we don't.
I can switch on the audio. Yeah.
Hello, Shireen. Welcome.
We can take one find how much weight people put
Ma'am, could you please
to
repeat?
each of the attributes that you are considering. Something that you could not do in reveal preference.
Hello, am I
You
audible?
could not separate preferences.
Yeah, wait. Yeah, there is two. Yeah.
During the discussion we saw, I mean, can we say that shortcomings of this system could be that, for example, we can use the FP method we do require that there should be a a sufficient amount of awareness or education is required. For example, if people they are assigning the values, so they can do this only when they are having sufficient enough knowledge about the environment, the significance of the environment would have. In the absence of that, definitely we need to have, there should be some sort of educational indicators. I think it should also be attached. Do you think so?
Yes.
That education too plays an important role in assigning the values. I mean, educational awareness, environmental awareness is also important in that case. So can we say that this is one of the shortcomings because for a developing and less developed countries like India, because in developed things are different.
Thank you for the question. For those of you who may have not heard, the question was whether the initial understanding or awareness of people about the specific topic matters and whether that is a shortcoming. And I will say that there are two ways to handle that. One, of course, and this is a great question because so far I have been focusing on the discrete choice experiment in itself. But remember, this is a survey that includes a battery of questions at the beginning before you present the discrete choice experiment, and a battery of questions after the discrete choice experiment. The questions before the discrete choice experiment are going to gather, among other things, the level of knowledge of the topic that people have. Because we cannot assume that people understand or have heard or are completely aware about the topic that we are presenting. So that after that, we can explore how much of the preferences that they're stating vary with the level of initial knowledge of the topic. So you can control for that. It's a shortcoming in the respect that we cannot assume that people know, but thankfully we can control and we can elaborate and we can analyze differences in preferences based on how much people knew or not at the beginning, prior the discrete choice experiment, right? Because if you ask those questions after that, then they already know, or you already introduced them, because part of the question was, should we include an education component or an information component if they don't know? And then my answer is a split sample. If you, with your semi-structured interviews, already know that people don't really know that much about the topic, you should probably make this an hypothesis. Will people change preferences if before presented to the discrete choice experiment, I present them to an information or educational component, right? So you start by saying, well, CO2 emissions, and then blah, 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 like a good paragraph of that. And then after that, you present the discrete choice experiment. Half of the sample. But the other half, you don't present them to that educational component, so that you can test whether that educational component matters.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. More questions?
No.
Okay. That reminded me something. Give me a second.
You'll get good workout.
Yeah, I get my workout in the courses, right? While I was answering that, I was thinking on saying something. I want to try to remember, but yeah, that was a very important question that gave me the excuse to tell you. Right now, we are talking about the discrete choice component, but a survey of discrete choice experiments includes a pre and post discrete choice experiment. In the pre, you do want to gather information about how much people know about the topic. And in the post, you want to gather how much people understood your discrete choice experiment. You are going to be including questions about whether people remember the attributes, the levels, whether they thought that they were important, or whether they thought that some of them were unimportant, and whether they thought that what they are answering has some policy implications or not. Remember, we are going to be talking about incentive compatibility and policy consequentiality in the next session. One more question? Yes.
Sir, my question is, you talked about full factorial design in this. So actually, any type of design what we're as of now working on, we work on agriculture fields or like in a controlled environment. So I want to know how you're applying this thing on social science field, as if now how you're integrating it into our field and how you're controlling the environment actually. Because like if you go to a place where you want to do any type of design, so you should have some benchmark for it.
That's a very good question. And that is one of those limitations. With the split sample, you want to believe that you have some level of comparison. But yeah, you don't have a before and after. In that respect is that sometimes when we talk about discrete choice experiments, it's a little bit confusing, right? Because that kind of brings the impact evaluation kind of framework. Before you have a baseline for treated control, and after you have the what happened, and then you can do diff in diff. Here with the split sample, we can do a comparison in only one diff. So not that you could not have a baseline, implement a discrete choice experiment, come back 6 months later, and re-implement the discrete choice experiment. But we don't do it in general because of the budgetary restrictions. Usually the big advantage of a discrete choice experiment is that at once it gathers preferences, and if you are willing to explore a split sample approach, right there you are able to explore. But that's a limitation. We cannot, and in general we don't talk about a baseline. Now, in the split sample approach, and that is something that Charu will be bragging about later on Friday, the important thing is to have balanced samples. Because in that respect, you can argue that in average, the people that receive an information treatment are identical to the people that did not receive the information treatment. That is what gives validity to the results if there are some results to a split sample. And I want to say that Charu will present you. It was beautiful. The average of the two samples that we had here in Delhi were, in average, identical. And that's the most we can do in the context of discrete choice experiment when we do split samples, that they look identical in the means. And then you can attach some kind of a effect to it, but it is not in the context of experiments, baseline, and everything. Yeah. More questions? Did I answer your question about the design? Yes? Did you get tired? Okay. Now I'm on.
Maybe
Yeah.
So, we know that the full factorial design gives us too many alternatives.
How do we reduce those number of alternatives? And maybe you want to talk about it tomorrow, I don't know. But what would be an objective way to, we have this D factorial design, the efficiency.
Oh, thank you. Something that I didn't talk, thank you. Actually, I was telling you how you end up with a fractional design in general, but in order to have that balance of how much of multicollinearity you want to give up, there is something called D-efficiency or measures of efficiency in general. And basically what they measure is they provide you with a guidance on how much standard errors are you losing of your estimates. That's the basic idea with efficiency. When you have collinearity, the reason why, or the way that statistically it reflects into not being able to separate the effects is in the standard errors. You are able to estimate, usually you are able to estimate point estimates of the coefficients, right? When you run a regression with collinearity, you get the coefficients. The problem is the standard errors. They tend to be so large that you don't have statistical significance. So the D-efficiency and other efficiency measures to ponder how much collinearity you are willing to bear in your design gives you, or basically considers how much will the standard errors increase in your point estimates and then it tells you, well, at this point you have way too much collinearity, you have the risk of not being able to separate the effects of your attributes. So you are going to, I'm going to be elaborating, but I'm glad that you brought up the concept so that you have an idea, and I relate it verbally to the concept of orthogonality. So something I'm going to do right now, because I think it's a good time, is I'm going to ask people to come forward with an example of discrete choice experiment in your context, or not an example per se, but what would you be thinking that will be interesting to explore in your field, in a topic that you are interested. So raise your hands. And
there is one online question.
Oh, there is one more question. So you have 5 minutes to think about your case.
There is one more online question from Subin. He's asking that can discrete choice experiments answer the causal question?
Yes. So the way you can think on discrete choice experiments is that it is answering a causal question, in the sense that by varying orthogonally the attributes, and by not letting you choosing them by yourself, it's accomplishing what usually we try in a regular cross-section OLS. And the parameters that we obtain, the partial correlation parameters that we obtain, are interpretable as causal effects. Causal, how much your preferences are changing because that attribute is changing. That's what you are documenting there. And in these times, it's kind of difficult for people to believe, in the sense that these days we are so set in the idea of the before and the after to believe causality. But think in this case we are kind of moving. Causality comes from, at least in econometrics, from not letting people choose the component in the left-hand side of the equation, and in the right-hand side of the equation. And that is what discrete choice experiments do. It doesn't let you choose the right-hand side of the equation. So in that respect is that we are documenting causality. But under those assumptions that we are putting itself in the model. Now, one of your examples. More questions?
So let's go to the example.
Who wants to raise your hand? Yeah, who wants to raise your hand? Yes, please.
You can also introduce yourself. I am Sangeeta, working in health economics from IIT Roorkee. So I am working on non-communicable disease among elderly population of India. So my two of the objectives on determinants of multimorbidity among elderly population, and some of on the basis of health behavior. And one of my objectives based on the economic and non-economic cost of non-communicable diseases borne by elderly people in India. Then the economic costs I have evaluated, and the non-economic costs, like intangible costs, I am going to evaluate from these. So the intangible costs, that includes anxiety, pain, and stress, insomnia, from management of non-communicable disease. When you are going through some NCD or multimorbidity, you have to bear that intangible cost apart from tangible costs, like direct costs, indirect costs, which cannot be evaluated, or which cannot be marketed, or which cannot be estimated. So my area of interest, or my attribute that I am going to evaluate, like anxiety, pain from particular NCD, like diabetes, whether you are going to substitute anxiety from pain, or how much compensation you are willing to pay, or how much compensation you are willing to receive for that anxiety, for that sleeplessness at the night due to diabetes, due to hypertension. So my area of interest and my scenario is like that.
I like it. I do like it. There is in health economics one non-market valuation method that we are not covering here is avoided cost. So how much are you spending on pills to sleep today, or a population of people with diabetes, how much do they spend? And then basically one way to interpret is if we were going to tackle that component, they will be saving this much money in pills, so that is an avoided cost. So that is something for you to keep in mind, because in terms of external validity, when you implement a discrete choice experiment, you want to compare it with avoided cost estimates for external validity. The one that I can think right now out of the top of my head, I will do a discrete choice experiment where I ask people, you have the possibility to I am thinking. So you wanna infer how much people will be willing to pay to avoid the anxiety component or the sleepiness component.
Maybe she can also look at marginal rates of substitutions between different, discomfort levels. Is it like, you're willing to bear pain, or you're willing to bear insomnia?
That is a good one, actually.
Actually, I have been to hospitals and medical centers dealing with people going through diabetes and all. So the scenario I absorbed from that, like the people are like, we must get the diagnosis of this in our hometown or nearby our house. So we don't have to travel. We are ready to bear that. That pain we are ready.
Yeah.
That we are ready to get that, but we get money for it for in compensation. Actually, it is based on the lower middle income countries, like how the income setup of that particular family is. If they are left, they don't have a leg or they don't have a arm, so that they are getting reservations or in the jobs like this, so they are getting compensated. They are happy with that. Kids, okay, we have diabetes. If in case we are getting a reservation in jobs, we are happy living with diabetes. Yes.
Very interesting research you're doing.
Yeah, but then that is already revealed preference. But basically what you want to do is you want to see if they are willing to, whether will they be willing to give up if they were able to remain with diabetes but being able to sleep and being able to not have anxiety. That will be the value. We have to think on something that the scenario, because basically what you are revealing is that they are willing already to live with diabetes, but also you know that if possible they would like to have better sleep and to have less anxiety.
Sometimes low-income families, the main problem is they get intangible costs from bearing tangible costs. Like they have too much to pay for the surgery or the drugs or the medicines, so they are getting anxiety for this. They are getting paid for this. So there are too much collinearity I am getting in these kind of aspects. I am getting intangible consequences of tangible cost. So
yeah, no, but what we have to think about is keeping diabetes fixed. What is the value to decrease anxiety and what is the value to decrease sleepiness? That is a good example, a very good one. I will need some time to think about it. It is the very first time I think about this case. I will be doing my homework as well tonight. But this is a very interesting case. Tell me something. Who will be your consumer of your results, of your findings? Is it an authority? Is it a government agency? Like these values, who do you want to communicate them to?
The participants of this experiment would be elderly people living with non-communicable diseases.
Okay.
Having two or more than two multi-morbid patients.
Mm-hmm.
So there are major 8 diseases I'm working on, including diabetes, hypertension, arthritis, respiratory and cardiovascular diseases. So we are focusing on those people.
Okay.
So we are targeting hospitals and NGOs and elderly care centers.
So your findings will be useful for hospitals, for instance?
You can.
Okay, okay. I am trying to think that also to see how we could set up, for instance, in this case, slowly but surely I am thinking on a scenario where you present some sort of treatment when people come to the hospital. And in that treatment, you basically vary sleepiness, anxiety, but in terms of diabetes, you more or less keep it as it is. But what you want to control is for the sleepiness and the anxiety. I'm going to be thinking on that. So right now, for tomorrow, for the next conversation with you, I think that a productive, constructive conversation is around, because you are the one who has better context, think on a situation in which you can present to the patients a situation in which they arrive to the hospital and they are able to receive certain treatments where you vary attributes and you vary the level of decreasing anxiety and decreasing sleepiness. And I think that you basically keep the diabetes fixed.
Yeah, keeping that. Yeah, in case of arthritis, we can fix pain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, it will vary from disease to disease or from cases to cases.
Mm-hmm.
But at least for a single case, I want to get a scenario, broad scenario, what I'm going to do.
Exactly. Okay, we are going to keep talking about it, okay? That was a very good example. Okay, we need to wrap up. Thank you.
3.5 hours and,
And I want to keep talking. Thank you so much.
So as part of evaluation, because this program also we want to evaluate your learning, I suggest that I encourage you guys to think about some example, like she had one in a group of 6, and one of you can have an idea and others can just join in and try working on these, so that by the end of it, by Friday, we'll give you some time and you can present your ideas to us. So I think that'll be an outcome that we're looking for this course. Adan, you want to?
I can complement that. Actually, these days I will ideally like you to come up with even the illustrations of your potential discrete choice experiment, because with ChatGPT, I have some students have been able to come up with a general kind of description of the illustrations. You don't have to work too much. When we at the beginning did it, we didn't have ChatGPT, and so the illustrations came until later when you were more sure. But I think that right now, kind of interactively working, and if you are going to be 6, some of you can be thinking on how the illustrations will look, and that helps a lot to communicate in a discrete choice experiment. Actually, that reminds me, something I'm going to be talking about is virtual reality. The next step for discrete choice experiments is virtual reality, because it's the one that gets you the closest.
Virtual reality.
Mm-hmm. So we will be talking a little bit about that. Thank you, everyone.
So we wind up for today, and we'll see you tomorrow at 2 p.m. same venue.